So today we're going to do different types of assessments. So first I want to ask you guys, who can tell me what that is? Scantron, right? So even now, when I see a Scantron, I know I get a little nervous. How many questions am I going to get right? There's so many bubbles, like what am I going to choose? So a lot of times your students can feel the same way. So we want to make sure that there's different types of assessments and we use those so that they don't always feel like nervous when they take a test. So today we're going to talk about the difference between qualitative and quantitative assessments and how those two break down into the three basic types of assessments: summative, formative, and performance-based. So Morrison and Wilcox define quantitative and qualitative assessments as numerical scores for quantitative, which comes from like quantity, so you think of a number base, and qualitative is more like depth of information, so this is stuff like interviews and observations that the students can make. So within those two categories come the three types of assessments: summative, formative, and performance-based. So summative assessments, Morrison and Wilcox define as the process of evaluating and grading the learning of students at a specific point in time. Oftentimes this is like after a unit. We see this a lot with the Common Core. We have to assess what students know and give them different tests. Morrison and Wilcox also define summative assessments in like two categories: a norm referenced and criterion referenced. So norm referenced is when the students take their scores and they're compared with a population of students, of other students, and they're compared that way, as opposed to criterion referenced, when the individual score of a student is compared to a standard. So Munzer did a study in 2014 about how learning and motivation connect with different types of assessments. So this study was done in a little bit higher level of education, but I really like the article because it could talk about a lot of ways that we can even use this in a primary education setting. He found that 73% of students actually did have more motivation with a summative assessment. He also found that in the 73%, most of them were only motivated by the grade. So we want to make sure as teachers that we get that motivation right from the start, more intrinsically, as opposed to just looking for the grade. So before we get into formative assessments, I want you to turn to the person sitting next to you and tell them something that you really like about their outfit today, and then something that you think would make it even better. Okay, so it's kind of a silly activity, I get it. But the idea was it's kind of like a formative assessment. It's not necessarily your outfit looks terrible and this you need to change it. It's giving feedback, giving improvement, and that's what we want to give students. So Morrison and Wilcox also define formative assessments as something that students should receive feedback on. They also talk about the RTI assessment. And with the RTI stands for response to intervention, and with that, that's when the teachers come together for students that don't necessarily learn as well with other instruction. So teachers come together and they figure out ways to help those students learn from different types of instruction and how you can improve your instruction to help the students learn. So Miranda and Herman did a study in 2015 through a student science class learning about magnets, and they used the formative assessment of the 5 E's. So that is engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And through this, the teacher would use each step, and in each step, give the student feedback so the student could improve for the next step, ultimately leading to the end goal of evaluation, where they watched a video on a train that was run by magnets, and the students were able to create a discussion about what they had learned based on all the feedback that the teacher gave in the previous 5 E's. So Cornelia, she also did a study, and she gave a lot of examples of ways that we as teachers can integrate this in our classroom every day. So she did some anecdotal seating charts, daily scorecards, and objective grids. So some of these examples, the anecdotal seating chart is just like it's very informal. You have the student's seating chart, and you walk around as they're doing an activity, and you look and see like what they're doing well versus what they're not doing very well. And then this is the daily scorecard. So that's something that the teacher can do at the end of the day. It's more in-depth, it's more detailed, and it has what the student did for homework, how they did and what they did well, versus like their exit ticket if they got certain things correct versus incorrect. And that helps the teacher really be able to differentiate what each student is learning and put it together to best fit instruction for each individual student. So the last type of assessment is a performance-based assessment. And Morrison and Wilcox define this as the measure of student academic achievement by evaluating their performance with hands-on tasks. So Peterman and like 7 other researchers did a study from a student age of 6 to 10, and they took those students and they made weather observations outside. And with those, they took their hands-on activity and they made graphs. They physically made graphs, they put things in categories of where graphs were. And after all of that happened, they took those students and they interviewed them and had them talk about what they had learned and what they had done. And there was also a group of students that didn't do any of that. They just created the graph from information they were given, written, from a piece of written information. So they found that after the interview, the students were able to tell them more information and understand what they had done because they had done a hands-on activity. And they were able to see that they really learned the information better this way. And so Morrison and Wilcox also talk about that with performance-based assessments, rubrics are needed. So it's a good guideline for students to have so they know what to expect and what you're looking for when you do these performance-based assessments like projects and presentations and performances that are more hands-on so they know what to expect. So now we're going to take a test. Okay, so you're going to get out your Kahoot. In what type of assessment should the students receive feedback for the first question? Is it formative, summative, or performance-based? So the formative assessment, a good way to remember that is formative and feedback. So they both start with that. So it's really important that formative involves feedback. So the next question is a true-false question. Performance-based assessments need rubrics to measure student learning. True. Good job. So performance-based assessments always need rubrics so that students understand what you need to do, what they need to do. So which of the following was not one of the 5 E's that can be used for formative assessments? So it's a little tricky. Good, most of you got it. So the 5 E's were engage, explain, elaborate, evaluate, and explore. Thank you. Okay, so true false question. Summative assessments are not graded. Good. Summative assessments are graded. So we are really familiar with these in our lesson plans because we're required to use a summative assessment at the end too. So good job, Esther. Oh. So in this presentation, in the three basic types of assessments: summative, formative, and performative.